first signs of spring are coming to East Devon, and I'm out looking for them. My name's Alex Boone. I'm a nature artist, specialising in nature journaling. I make nature journals keeping track of nature around me, and I teach others to do the same. This year I'm working on a project tracking the 72 microseasons of my home in East Devon in the UK. Today I'm going to be sharing a couple of paintings in my journal. Plus I'm going to be sorting out my enormous nature book collection, and we'll go for a beautiful winter walk along the coast. I'm going to be vlogging throughout this year, so make sure you subscribe and follow along. After all the rain we've been having recently, it's so good to finally have a bit of sunshine. I've been able to come up to the side of the valley overlooking the sea to do a bit of nature journaling. This is quite an interesting location. It's a little bit of scrubland that's kind of just been left to its own devices. There's quite a lot of dog walking and stuff that goes on here, but there's always so much bird song. You can probably hear the birds around me right now. And it's somewhere where you can come and sit with them and listen and watch and record whilst having a beautiful view to look at the same time. So today I just came out with my lunch and my nature journal and a little bit of recording equipment. When I first showed up here today, actually, there was a kestrel on these telegraph wires up here, and I was able to get one photograph before he noticed that I was there and looking at him, and he flew off. But I found it quite interesting that the kestrel was sat on the wire, but there were loads of small birds sort of flocking around, and they didn't seem to be too bothered by the fact that the kestrel was even there. So I think that's something quite interesting to record. I don't know whether that's going to go down as one of my micro-seasons, as it's kind of pretty common to see the kestrels around at any time of year, but you get one or two of them right now and they're wonderful to look out for. The last few days I've been really interested in these reeds, particularly this one photo I took on a sunset when the light was just catching the tops of the reeds. I've done a few practice sketches. This one I did on brown craft paper, which I stuck into the journal. It takes a little while to sit with a fine liner and work out all of these lines. I also found in my cupboard some of this onion skin paper. It's vintage, it used to be in old ledgers. I want to see if I can find a way to use this, plus some other collage materials, to pull together an image from my main journal. I printed out a few stickers from the photograph on my little handheld printer. This was the page when I'd finished it for that day. The next day I'm in the studio with my hot chocolate in my own Animals of Farthing Wood mug featuring my artwork, and I decided that I would work on a painting of the reeds, and now I actually am working in my journal for this year. I've got the practice run by my side. I think one of the main things that I decided to do was to keep this kind of very watercolory and soft, rather than having all of the hard lines of that fine liner drawing that I did. But it does mean a lot of painting very carefully by hand, and I found that using the small brush wasn't really working, so I switched to this big brush, which, although it's got a really nice little sharp point on it, it holds more water in the brush itself. I'm sure many of you could have told me this, but I've been fiddling around with small brushes, and I'd gotten used to water brushes as well, which was always a little easier because whenever I wanted water, I'd just squeeze. I'm playing a lot with collage this year, and the intention really is to try and capture the kind of soft light from that sunset by laying this onion skin paper over my painting. So periodically I'm having to check that it looks good through the paper. Here's the finished painting after many more hours of sitting about with that paintbrush trying to paint lots and lots of fine lines. Now what I've got to do is work out a way to glue down this onion skin paper whilst letting the painting underneath still be visible if someone wants to see it in more detail. What I'm doing is cutting the onion skin paper into two sections, and I'm going to glue it down the centre of the spine of the book. And that's going to allow a viewer to move that paper if they want to take a look at the painting underneath. So it's not kind of permanently glued on top. I'm using a little bit of EVA glue, and I'm carefully pushing it down into the spine to make sure that it's very well glued along the centre, but can also be lifted up easily from the edges. This is what it looks like after I put the second side in. I'm just using a bit of kitchen towel to just run down the centre, make sure that there's no glue stuck on that's coming onto the top surface. I don't want anything to start sticking together and kind of getting in the way of the natural opening of the spine of the book. I've also kept the little numbers in that are printed on the old ledger. I think there's something kind of beautiful about the old use of this paper that I wanted to incorporate into the final journal page. It creates this beautiful, subtle look at the painting. It's a very kind of unique texture that I think I'm going to work with a lot more this year. I find it kind of beautiful working with an interesting collage material in this way. Today I'm going to be organising my enormous nature book collection on these bookshelves here behind me. One of the things I do have to be aware of is this one, and she likes to chew books. So when I stack the shelves I have to be really careful because I love my books and want to protect them, and also want to make them kind of easy to find. I'm going to put the bigger ones up the back and a row of smaller ones in front, so you can still kind of see the titles or some of the spines of all of the bigger books up the back. And hopefully by doing that I'll make the dual purpose of being able to find things, which will be amazing, but also protecting all of the books from Luna, because she won't be able to get up on the shelf and start chewing. Okay, now I'm quite literally surrounded by all the books that were up on the bookshelf, because there's kind of lots of different things here. I've got normal nature writing, there's also kind of teaching books, ones that are about how to nature journal or how to do specific artistic practices. Great big stack over there of people's actual nature journals, and then just loads of guidebooks, nature writing. So I'm just going to get it all loaded back onto the bookshelf, and then I'll go through it kind of once I've done it, I think. Now, to me, this is looking a whole lot better. I can see where everything is. I've kind of got all of my guidebooks over in one specific section. I've got a group of poetry books right here that I'm keeping together. Loads of nature writing titles in this little section, and some more of my smaller guidebooks up the end. So I'm kind of keeping all of the guidebooks in the same kind of part of the shelves. Lots of art books and nature journals in this middle bit, and then some kind of more botanical sort of work towards this side, and practical gardening and art books up the other end. If there's anything in particular that you'd like to see a little bit more of, I don't really do book reviews on this channel, but I could do a video all about the books that kind of related to nature journaling and kind of all of those sorts of things. If that's something you'd like to see, just let me know in the comments. This is a stretch of coastline I know really well. It's beautiful at any time of year. You can find all sorts of things on the beach here. But it's kind of wild today. The oyster catchers don't seem to mind though. They're feeding among the piddock holes here. Piddocks are like little shellfish. They bore into the rock, make a little burrow for themselves. And the oyster catchers love to feed in these holes. The crows don't seem to mind either. It was a cold day, and I walked in over the front of the cliffs. I took a quick moment for a few notes, but I didn't really get much down. The air was biting, and there was spray from the water. You can get round the front of the cliffs here at most tides, but it's much safer at a low tide. I have been caught out here once or twice and had to wade or swim. Sometimes you see the rock pipits here, feeding among the rocks. When you get to Beer, there's a bit of a climb. I usually come up right up at this corner and pull myself up onto the seawall, but there is a ladder over there. I've never really fancied the ladder though. I'd rather use my own strength and pull myself up onto the wall. Then it's just over this bank and we're into the little village of Beer. I hope you enjoyed the footage of my walk down on the beach just now. I didn't put the face camera on and the microphone because it was so windy and loud with the waves down there. I really didn't know whether actually you'll be able to hear anything I was saying. While I was down there, I was just thinking about how difficult it actually is to work out what is a micro-season in terms of not just doing a painting of something that I would have done anyway because it's just this time of year, or something that appears kind of at any time of year. Like I was looking at those oyster catchers feeding on the rocks, and those oyster catchers are there year round and they always do that. And I was kind of thinking, what is it about right now that really makes it right now and it couldn't possibly be any other time? And it was really difficult to kind of come up with something. I had the rock pipits all around me, and you know, that was amazing, but the rock pipits are always there. You see them, they nest here, they stay here all the time. So I was kind of just looking at things like the quality of light and this sort of greyness that, you know, I could actually see like on the camera right now just how low the light can be around here at this time of year. So I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe something about the quality of that white light and the way it looks on the sea. So while I'm on these kind of really early stages of the project, I'm trying to actually work out what it is I'm even trying to do here. What am I trying to achieve? What is it that makes each of these paintings something different, some shift from the previous one? Or maybe I'm just overthinking it, and maybe what I'm doing really is just doing a painting for every sort of 5 days of this year. I'm not sure. It feels like it kind of should be more than that.
I just need to settle into this and just kind of maybe stop overthinking, stop overanalyzing, and just get noticing things. Got some dog violets in flower here. I mean, they're the first ones that I've seen this year. I've just about finished my walk today. This majestic view of Seaton behind me. I'm up at the top of the cliff, right above where I was walking earlier on. I'm going to give this project a bit more thought as I'm putting together the next few paintings, try and work out just what it is that I'm trying to capture and do here. I don't know, and how I'm going to go forward with this project, bearing that in mind. Like I said earlier, I don't want to overthink this, but I also don't want to start doing one thing and wind up doing something else as we get to the end, particularly as this is something I'd quite like to make a book out of. So I've really got to kind of get this nailed down and defined right now. I think it might be enough just to be thinking about in detail and finding something to represent every approximately 5-day period of the year and doing a painting about it and maybe a few words. Is that enough to make this project really sing and be unique and different? Is that enough? Why don't you tell me in the comments? What do you think? Do you think that this is kind of working out the way that I've designed it so far? And if you haven't seen the earlier videos, there's 2 so far on this project. So this is the 3rd one. So you can go and find those on my channel. But for now, I think I've had enough of kind of grey, white February skies. I'm going to walk down the hill back to the car and head on home for a nice cup of tea.
Three microseasons down, and I kind of want to now get on with my 4th microseason journal page. You'll remember from the last video I spotted this beautiful tree creeper out on a walk in the woods. And I made a practice journal page in that video, so if you haven't seen that one you can go and have a look and sort of see a little bit more about the process on this. But this was just trying out the idea, just like I did with the reeds, try it out first and then see if it's going to work. I also did a whole bunch of little preliminary sketches of the tree creeper, and I'm using a technique here. Sometimes I find that you gather all of these pencil dusts from your pencil sharpener, and I think it's a bit of a waste of pigment. It could be used for something. So I like to use it to create backgrounds for drawings. These are my preliminary sketches finished. One thing I like to do when I'm working on a painting is make myself a little grotto of reference materials. So I've got my own preliminary sketches here, and I've got some other beautiful illustrations that I've found of tree creepers to help me get inspired for my own work. I used a very soft wet on wet technique with my Derwent Inktense here to make a very soft, subtle background to make it look like the woodland that I walked through in the mist. It took a long time for this page to dry, so I kind of left it for a little while. Then I decided I would lay in much more detail the painting over the top. So I did a really detailed painting of this tree bark with lots of lichen and moss. I'm using a dry brush technique here to kind of make it look more dirty and outdoors. Now I'm layering in some ink onto the tree creeper, keeping it really soft. It's kind of like an underpainting, which I'm going to lay over the top much stronger pigment straight from my Derwent Inktense Studio Pan set. This is my favourite medium for doing this sort of painting. I'm using a medium-sized brush here with a very fine point on the end of it. Just like I mentioned earlier, it allows there to be plenty of water and pigment in the brush, but I can use the very fine tip to do some really quite delicate work, like the beak there, the eye, and all of these little edges here. I'm just painting in a little bit of colour onto the tree creeper's body. So this is the final page. You see you get a really good contrast between the much closer bark and tree creeper and the very, very soft background of the wet on wet technique. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching this little insight into my process. Let me know if there's anything in particular you'd like to see as I continue to document the micro seasons of this year. Thank you so much for watching. I'll I'll see you next time.